What's up guys, Zach here with another devlog for Knight of the Forgotten Realm. It's been a while, huh? Well, one of my most anticipated games of the past few years and Lost Ark released, and let's just say that all the time that I dedicated to video creation got shifted over to Lost Ark. But the good news is my game development time remained the same, and so there's a lot to cover here. And so let's just go ahead and roll that intro and dive right in. So to kick us off, the scope of this devlog will primarily focus on the game's UI, but we'll quickly highlight some of the other stuff I worked on as well. Starting off with the health, stamina, and power bars, the last time you saw them they did look very bland as the placeholders were still in place, they were just engine widgets. You see on the screen before, and here is the after. The goal was to tailor them to one of the game's main themes, which is burnt books, as a callback to the Great Burning, the genocidal crusade that Typherius led across all of Osteria, killing believers of Eternia who would not bend the knee and relinquish their belief as well as knowledge in the Eternals. While these bars personally look a ton better to me, they're not 100% finished by any means. I still am going to add a little bit more refinements to them to make them a little less pointy, as right now they're a little too pointy on the edges there. But my goal is also to add an impactful usage effect that you've likely seen in Dark Souls games, and some particle effects on the soul power bar as well, just to make everything look a lot more special. However, they are in a good spot right now. I no longer look at them and look at my game as, wow, this game is just a game. Now it actually kind of looks a lot more cohesive, which makes me feel like I'm on the right track. Another large UI change was the soul enhancement UI. You may recall that before, as on the screen right now, it was just a flat 2D interface, which was a placeholder burnt book as its theme. While this proved the functionality to be sufficient and that the theme would work, it was never going to be the final interface as it looked amateurish. It's terrible. I mean, look at it. So behold the new Soul Enhancement UI. As you'll see, it's now a 3D interface with a hover as well as clicked effects, along with the prior effect where unattainable enhancements would be transparent and then darken once obtained, aka being burnt into the book. The whole UI has a new lease on life, and while it's not 100% finished, as I do want to tweak the effects a bit and add a transition to the interface, because as of right now, animation wise, it's instant, it's a camera cut. It's so much closer to final than it was before, but it was a journey getting to the spot, as 3D interfaces are quite buggy. The funny thing about the 3D interfaces is it's another known engine issue, at least with Unreal Engine 4 prior to 4.27.2. I was on 4.26, just base, and when I implemented the 3D interface, I did everything correctly, but it still just would not work. It wouldn't detect my mouse clicks, it wouldn't detect my hovers, it wouldn't detect anything, and so I went through a ton of troubleshooting online, Googling and finding out a lot of people had this issue in between versions of Unreal Engine. And so when I found that out, I was like, okay, well, I'm doing everything right, and people are saying it's fixed on this version, it's not working on this version, it's fixed on this version. Maybe if I just upgrade my engine to 4.27.2, everything would be fine. First, I tried just 4.26.2, didn't work. Then I converted all the way up to 4.27.2. And so once I did that, everything worked. I was like, wow, okay, cool. So now my 3D interface works and everything's good to go. So what you're probably wondering is, how does soul binding work? How does an Eternal bind to someone's soul, and what are the differences between a full binding and a partial binding? Well, a partial binding is when an Eternal resurrects someone and they bind themselves a little bit to the person's soul, essentially so that way they can talk with them and also make their perception a little different. So for instance, a partial binding is mostly reserved for diplomats. If the Eternal wants to see the diplomat or the politician see something in their own way to try and influence events, then they would do a partial binding. What this doesn't allow the Eternal to do, though, is funnel any power to the particular politician or diplomat, because in order to do that, you need a full binding. And the way that full bindings work is there needs to be a catalyst that provokes a strong emotional reaction from the subject at hand when that full binding occurs. So in Either Forgotten Realm, when Vali is kicked off of the cliff and dies, Lucien will swoop in and partially bind himself to Vali in order to resurrect him, and then tell him to complete the full binding by heading over to a floating book. The book signifies the Great Burning for Vali, as Vali was a participant in the Great Burning and followed the orders of Typherius. So because Vali is very conflicted about what he did over the course of his time in Typherius's army, he has a strong emotional response to a book that is essentially burning and floating in the sky. And so when he's binding himself to Lucien, because of the strong emotional response that this book is causing, that means that the full binding is a very strong full binding. And as a result, that means that Lucien will be able to funnel a lot of soul power to Vali, enhancing his combat abilities, allowing him to overcharge his soul, and just developing powers beyond the normal human capability. So that's the difference between a full and partial binding. The risk for an Eternal, though, is when they fully bind themselves to a soul, it runs the risk of them getting fully drained of their own soul energy. And if they get fully drained of their own soul energy, not only does the vessel, in this case it would be Vali, go poof and die, because they no longer have the fuel that's causing them to live on after they've died, but then also the Eternal goes poof as well, or if they get a lot of their soul energy drained, not all of it, but just some of it, they could also lose standing on the Eternal Council as well, because the Eternal Council values the smarts of the Eternals that are on the council, the responsibility of understanding one's soul energy and not giving it all to one subject. So there's a lot of cool dynamics there that are in play, and that's why there's a give and take mentality that you're going to experience with Lucien being bound to Vali. He's not just going to let you die constantly. He's going to get really pissed at you if you do that, and you're also going to have to contribute with soul orbs in order for you to gain more power, because he wants to see you contribute, so that way he's not just giving you a lot of energy. He has to take something as well. So that's really one of the key features of Night of the Forgotten Realm, is that give and take theme. And hopefully, now that you know a little bit more about it, it'll make a lot more sense why some of these elements are in place within the game. So speaking of soul orbs, what are they and how do you obtain them? Well, it's quite simple. Soul orbs are the souls of those who die. In the case of irredeemable souls, which all ancient ones are, their souls are then absorbed by Eternals to gain power that can then be distributed to those who they are bound to. As an Eternal binded subject, Vali can see these soul orbs drop from enemies that he kills. Then they absorb into him, regenerating some health, increasing his soul integrity, aka bond with Lucien, and also providing him one soul orb currency. This currency can then be used to purchase soul enhancements and augments to kit out your chosen build. As I hope you see, I did put a lot of thought into how to ground every one of these elements within the game's lore to immerse you that much more, as that's really the goal while playing Night of the Forgotten Realm, is to feel grounded and immersed into its world. While we're done with deep dives in this devlog, let's go ahead and touch on some of the other things that I implemented in my plans moving forward. One of the things that you've probably noticed by now is that Vali can climb. This will allow me to be a lot more creative with my level design and has added some variations to the game. Climbing is certainly rough in its current states, especially the animations, but it'll get there eventually. Speaking of things getting there, I did improve the AI a decent bit. Their pathing is now a tad less sporadic due to the fact that I disabled their gravity, which apparently is a pro tip I actually ended up learning from a Unity devlog of all places, and their hit detection is far more accurate. This ultimately means that the game feels a lot more fair. No longer are you getting hit after an enemy's dead, you're actually going to get hit only when the enemy's alive. Brilliant, right? On top of that, I've been finalizing the special attack of the first side dungeon boss, which went from a cheesy howl that had spider-like webs come from its mouth to a howl, causing the cave to be unstable, which is foresight when it comes to the first note that you experience within the cave that says, warning, cave is unstable. And so you have to dodge or block the rocks falling from the ceiling. While the rocks will, deflect off of your sword, by blocking them, you're still going to absorb the full damage from them. You just won't be knocked down as if you, just got hit in the face with it. But yeah, it's still really much in development. I'm playing around with the frequency of attacks. There's also the strong attack that you might see where the wolf charges up, I guess, if you want to call it that, and then lunges forward. That actually takes 3 ounces of damage and can knock you back if you don't block it or dodge it. But AI just keeps getting better and better. The next thing I'm going to try and do is work on their rotation, make it so they only rotate to the player when they need to and they're not facing them, not just all the time, which you will see periodically, and they're still a little sporadic when they do that. But yeah, they're just getting better and better over time. So that's definitely a good sign that I'm on the right path there. There's also a lot of other additions that you may have noticed just by watching the gameplay, and there was a lot of stuff implemented and optimized on the back end as well. For instance, I'm now in Unreal Engine 5 versus Unreal Engine 4. The reason why is because Unreal Engine 5 is officially launched, and so I felt comfortable finally going and converting my game to the engine that it will be on all the way up until launch. And so far, so good. The interface is great. Everything is working just as it should. Some stuff's just in different spots, and obviously the UI is getting it's something to get used to. It's obviously way better looking, but there's stuff in a little different areas. And I had to fix a few little minor issues, but for the most part, the transition wasn't that bad at all. But now that we are in Unreal Engine 5 and now that we have made it this far, where to now? All right, so what is the path forward from here? So there is a lot of things that I still need to do in order to get done with phase 3 of Knights of the Forgotten Realms development and get a public Steam demo up and going, ready for a next fest. The first thing that I need to do is remove the old tutorial. The old tutorial is gone. It's not good. It's very amateurish. I don't want to deal with having a long tutorial like that because you guys don't want it. I don't want it. It's not good. And that's really why I made the video of my greatest game dev mistake being around voice acting, because I needed to make sure pacing was going to be good prior to getting voice acting, which I didn't do. And so I wasted some money and time on that. So the new tutorial will be more nudging after the opening cinematic, which the opening cinematic right now is a pre-rendered video. That's scrapped. A lot of the elements of it, though, are still intact. So what's going to happen is you're going to see an opening text sprawl on the screen that will then, once finished, have a flame effect that goes across the camera, which then will have you zoom out from a candle within a building where there's a book on the table that the camera will pan down to called Knight of the Forgotten Realm. The book will then open, and then there'll be the first art piece that you see in the pre-rendered version that will have a narrator narrating all the different pages that the book will go through up until the point where Volley gets kicked off the cliff. And then once Volley is about to hit the floor is when it will cut to live gameplay. You'll see Volley hit the floor and die very brutally. And then after that, you'll see the binding happen between, at least the partial binding between him and Lucian. Then Volley will wake up, and then you'll be able to complete the full binding, which will be the first game's tutorial that will sort of nudge you to click on the soul overcharge capability, which will then complete the full binding between you and Lucian, and also serve as a tutorial on the soul enhancement system within the game. Then you'll climb for the first time, not only learning about interacting with things, but also learning how to climb. You'll reach the top, there'll be a first wolf, and then you'll see a little bit of widgets on the right side of the screen that will tell you how to left click to light attack, press F to heavy attack, press control to dodge, press right click in order to block. This very short line, so that way it's very concise, very compact, and it won't be too much in your face, and you'll try and defeat your first wolf. And then you'll just move on from there. You'll keep heading east and discovering new things. It will be a lot more of a nudging rather than an in-your-face tutorial, which was ultimately goal from the beginning, but I just did not know how to nail that opening. And now, since I storyboarded it, I've imagined it. I am fairly certain that this is going to be the knock it out of the park opening for Knight of the Forgotten Realm that I've been looking for, because first impressions matter so much And the first impression the game was giving before was, this is terrible. Terrible, terrible, terrible. So before you even got in the game and started discovering the cool parts about it, you're like, damn, this is really low budget. So the new opening will be a lot more polished, a lot more final looking. Let's be really a lot better overall. Another thing that I alluded to is there will be more storytelling too, via the note system that's in the game. I'm going to be enhancing the note system by having a panel on the right of a note. So the note will pop up on the screen and then slide to the left, and then there'll be a panel on the right. The panel on the right will be for accessibility reasons, because the notes, while thematically correct, are going to have fonts that are thematically correct. And because the fonts will be thematically correct and maybe have some story elements like blood across the text, sometimes they'll be a bit more difficult to read. So I want to make sure that you're able to read them very easily. So there'll be another panel on the right that will have a clear font that you'll be able to read the notes before you close it. And the note will also give you experience, because one of the other things Lucien wants is knowledge about everything that went on, as well as, you know, just anything that is around the area of Elamor, because he needs to piece together certain elements to bring back to the Eternal Council. So every bit of knowledge that you gather will give you more experience. The experience will then increase your soul integrity, which will allow you to get more attribute points, and also will increase your relationship with Lucien as well. And so the note system will be built up on even further. I like how it is right now, but it needs to be refined a bit more. I've also made the interaction system instant instead of you had to charge until the circle filled up, because instant feels a lot better than having to wait for something to fill up. I hate when games do that. I don't know why I decided to do it in my own game, and I was just kicking myself for doing it. So I'm glad that I changed it to instant. It'll feel a lot better for you. There's also hints to what notes you haven't looked at versus ones you have, via the purple sparks. That is basically Lucien altering your perception, so you could tell what you've looked at and what you haven't. So that will help you figure out what's interactable for one and what you haven't looked at for two. So that will be a good enhancement to just help me storytell even more within the game. Another piece of storytelling will be the opening cabin, and so I'm going to be increasing the amount of detail within the cabin just to make it so there's a bit more storytelling elements within it, and it's a bit more detailed just overall. I'll also be introducing the second or third, or fourth actually if you count the tutorial, the fourth AI within Night of the Forgotten Realm, which is the Face Eater AI, and that will be when you actually go through the cellar. You'll be introduced to that AI, and that will be part of the Phase 3, the final build for it. You'll be able to face at least 2 of those prior to reaching the end of the demo. And so that is really the goal in terms of the content: finishing the notes, finishing the Face Eater AI, finishing the new opening, and as a result, the new tutorial, and then polishing everything up for Phase 3's finalization, which means publishing the build onto Steam and getting it ready for the very last next fest of the year, which I'm not sure when that will be. I'm not sure if they've even announced it, but that's my goal, is to get a demo ready to go for that, so that way I could start gathering wish lists and start marketing this game, and also reaching out to different funds as well to try and get additional funding for Night of the Forgotten Realm, which is going to be acting as sort of a stretch goal. It's not required to complete the development of Night of the Forgotten Realm, but I've spent about where I've wanted to spend so far on this game, besides voice acting, which I've accounted for in my budget. But after voice acting, I've spent basically what I want to on Night of the Forgotten Realm. So any further spending is going to have to be external money, which will be essentially allowing me to introduce new elements within the game, additional polish, and just really furthering the game as much as possible. So I'll be, checking out the Epic Mega Grants. There's also a couple other different grant funds that are out there for game dev that I'll be applying to. And then I'll also be marketing the game a lot more in Phase 3, because Phase 3 is when the game will be a lot more polished and actually have a Steam demo, and a good trailer up on Steam as well. So it'll be a lot more marketable at that point, which is why I haven't really marketed a ton now. But regardless, be sure to go out and wishlist the game on Steam. It's free, and I appreciate every single bit of the wish list that I've gotten so far, even though I'm not really at that phase of development yet. Just getting those initial bit of wish lists is really helpful, and I appreciate that tremendously. But that said, guys, that is where we are at currently in the Night of the Forgotten Realms development. My name is Zach. I hope you enjoyed the video enough to leave a like and subscribe. And as always, I will catch you all next time.